Geography is more than just maps. The study of cultural geography involves observing places and their features to understand more about the people who live there. How people interact with, shape, and transform the land they live on can be indicators of their shared beliefs, practices, and values. For instance, the style of buildings they construct, the types of art they put on display, how they interact with each other in public spaces, and the way they curate nature can all give clues as to what the inhabitants of a place value and believe. When you consciously observe the environment around you using all five senses, especially your sense of sight, you're taking a step towards better understanding a culture. In the operational context, your five senses might be all you initially have to make an assessment of an environment and the people who live there. Picture a typical American neighborhood. It may look something like this. This is probably an environment that you've passed through on numerous occasions, or maybe you've even lived someplace like it. But have you ever stopped to observe what it might tell you about American culture? Imagine you have little knowledge of American culture and are seeing this environment for the first time. What would you conclude from looking at it? You might notice that cars and the garages they are stored in play a prominent role in this landscape. You also see a paved road. What might these features tell you about this culture? You might also notice that each house has a well-manicured front lawn. One house has a sprinkler spraying water onto the grass. You know that in some cultures, getting enough water for the day can be a labor-intensive affair. You might theorize that this is a relatively wealthy culture if they can afford to spray water onto the grass. Or you might guess that the natural resources of this area include abundant water. A word of caution. All of these conclusions are plausible, but none can be confirmed by sight alone. Observing the landscape with your senses can be a good start to understanding more about a culture, but follow-up is needed to confirm or invalidate guesses. It is also important to be aware of what you don't notice, as well as to be aware of any biases that might shape your perceptions. Let's look at a few examples. Look closely at the features of this place. What conclusions can you begin to draw about the people who live here? You might first notice simple thatched-roofed buildings. You might see these as traditional houses and conclude that this culture is itself quite traditional. Then you notice that there are power lines running between buildings and that some of the houses have satellite dishes. You surmise that this village is not as traditional as you initially thought. After talking to a group of villagers, you find out that the circular buildings with thatched roofs are not houses, but places to store grain and other crops. You learn that the people who own the storehouses sell the grain at local markets and are able to buy technologies like satellite dishes and televisions. By suspending judgment and thinking holistically about the various technologies and trends can change a place over time, you are better able to understand the challenges and opportunities you may face in the local setting. What stands out about this place? You notice armed military personnel. You think about your hometown and how people would react if armed military personnel were stationed in a busy shopping center. Before you jump to the conclusion that these people must be alarmed too, you use your senses to gauge their moods and notice that they do not seem fearful or on alert. You conclude that there has long been unrest in this region and that inhabitants have gotten used to the military in everyday places. Of course, not everyone reacts the same way to things. While some parts of the population may be fine with troops standing around the market, remember that there will always be variation from individual to individual. You make a mental note to talk to your regional expert about this observation later. What do you think when you see this landscape? You might recognize the Campbell's logo in the tower. You might feel a bit disconcerted as the image in your mind when you think about Campbell's soup does not match the dilapidated appearance of this area. You conclude that this area must be an abandoned wasteland, but then you walk outside the perimeter of the old factory and notice boutiques, loft apartments, cafes, and plenty of smiling people out and about. You conclude that while this area was once industrial, it is now being transformed into a place of leisure and consumption. What might the evidence of change over time tell you about the people here and how they make a living? Imagine you and your friends come upon this building. You smell incense in the air. Though you see many people, you don't hear lots of talking and laughter. People are talking in hushed tones, if at all. Using these observational clues, you guess that this may be some type of sacred or reverential space. Because you've taken the time to employ your senses to learn more about the environment, you are able to conclude that this is not a good place to loudly sing happy birthday to your friend. Geography can tell you more than how to get to a place. It can also tell you about that place and the people who live there. By observing a place and the way that its inhabitants use space and shape the landscape, you can begin to understand more about them. Following up with the insights you have gathered through observation will help you to solidify and expand your knowledge. Your 5 senses are a great tool in getting to know a culture better. By observing the environment around you, you can pick up on clues and context that will help you to better orient yourself, even in a place that you have never been.